Hello, and welcome back to A Better World. This is your host, Mitchell J. Rabin, and we're very glad you're joining us again today. Today we're going to have another very interesting show. We have invited back the author of this book, TheRe Connection, Dr. Eric Pearl, who is a chiropractor by profession, and to whom so many interesting things, very special occurrences, happened in the early years of his practice that it radically changed everything he was doing. He found, as you may remember, for those of you who saw the earlier interviews with Eric, he had a rather miraculous power that started to charge through him and informed his hands, which then was in some way transmitted, or other people's resonance field began to react to this energy. And he has been traveling around the world teaching this system, the reconnection, to people all over. Practitioners, healers, doctors have been interested in this work, and it's taken off like mad. So we're very glad to have you with us again, Eric.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
Good. So since I've seen you last, you've traveled around the world a couple of times and brought this to places as far-reaching as Australia. And people are just gobbling it up, as far as I can tell.
It seems that way.
Yeah.
The book is already translated into French. It's coming out in Hebrew, Turkish, Polish.
Turkish? Wow.
Greek, Norwegian.
How about Arabic? We could use it in Arabic now.
Yes, we can. I've been invited to speak at the UAE.
United Arab Republic.
UAE, United Arab Emirates.
Emirates.
And we've spoken about that we want to have the book published first in Arabic because we want enough people to know about it in advance.
Yes.
So we are hoping for that also.
That's fabulous. That's fabulous. Now, what do you feel people are most responding to? Is it the feeling they get by doing the practice? Is it the results they're getting from the practice?
It has to be a combination of that plus more. I mean, the fact is what brings people into wanting to learn this are the results that they see. Most definitely the results that they see. That's probably why, as I said, we have close to about 6,000 practitioners now worldwide. Maybe 25.
And that's in a fairly short period of time, huh?
I would say since I started actually giving good-sized seminars about past 2 years, and about 25% or so of those practitioners are medical doctors, chiropractors, physical therapists, osteopaths, nurses.
People in the field of healing and health.
Right. But then again, also, maybe another 25-30% of them are people who come from backgrounds completely unrelated to a concept of healing, be it more allopathic or more energy.
Like accountants.
Accountants.
Really?
Elected government officials.
Wow.
Computer workers, truck drivers, and bank presidents. And then, of course, what's really fascinating are a good number of people who come in, a large number of people are master healers already in the various recognized healing techniques such as Reiki, TheRe, Jinshin, Qigong, Mahjong, Beijing.
Mahjong. My grandmother would be competing.
There you go.
In fact, this is a good moment, Eric. Perhaps you could make a distinction between what the reconnective healing technique is distinct from Reiki and Jinshin, the other ones. I'm sure you're asked that question a lot, but I do think it's important for people to have some bearing, some sense of the distinction.
Well, the initial way I can describe a distinction between these and the other techniques isn't from my own experience with techniques, because what
you
we're
didn't
doing...
know them, actually, right?
Right, I didn't know them. What we're doing is beyond technique, because it's actually a state of being. Trying to do technique with this will limit it to the results of those techniques. But my information comes from the master teachers who attended the seminars, who explained that it's much more palpable. You can feel it strongly. The results are exceedingly more dynamic. The healings seem to occur almost instantaneously. as if by grace, without having to go through processing or, the no pain, no gain concept getting worse,
or healing crises.
Or, right, without having to go through any of that.
Worse before better.
You don't have to do any of that now.
But you can.
You can if you choose to.
Okay.
You can if you buy into it being necessary, but once you see that it isn't, see, your mastery comes from actually seeing that this exists, because we haven't been taught that this existed, because we have not experienced it before. We've come from a period when we first, when we were growing up, we were told that we were three-dimensional beings. And this is what science, for the most part, has told us all the way up till 1999, where they called us 3D+. And then finally in the year 2000, those brave little scientists and researchers stepped forward and announced, finally, that we are four-dimensional, the fourth dimension being time. And so many people are aware that time is moving. I mean, you've noticed that time seems to be moving more rapidly. Well, time is expanding. Feels as if it's moving faster, yet we're getting more accomplished in this faster time, which seems almost like a contradiction. So what's happening is time is expanding, and we are now four-dimensional. We're recognized that way. Yes. So the fourth dimension being time, let's think of four sides to, this might not be the best analogy, but let's try it, to a box. So you've got a four-sided container. Mm-hmm. One side of this box is expanding and opening up. So what does that mean to that box, that container that we're in? It means that its capacity has expanded, so it can now hold more. It has a larger opening, so things can fit into it that couldn't get in before. Mm-hmm. Well, a lot of the researchers are positing that the reason that reconnective healing is so dynamic and so far above in the techniques we've had up until now is because our four-dimensional existence could only accept something of a certain size. They feel that this may well be, it's definitely new healing frequencies, and may well be an entirely new bandwidth, which is a very strange concept to entertain. That could not fit when we were here, and now that we've opened up, it's the first time it's present on the Earth. So the frequencies are old because they're of the universe. Sure. They're new because they have not been here before. So this
they, even if they were here, they're now being received, perhaps for the first time.
You might be able to say that, but in essence, in the existence that we felt we were in, be it an illusion that we have to make real for our life experience, they didn't fit. They weren't here. So it's not a healing technique used from an ancient society that's been found. It is not that.
Right.
It's not something that Joe Smith, that who lives at the beach, has been oming in for 30 years. It is not that. What they've run and were wonderful, but this is new. And the way to access this, and it's easily and instantly accessible, but the way to access this is to come into contact with someone who's doing the work, which I guess is part of the way the teaching seminars came about.
In a way, but that actually is a similar kind of transmission idea that you find in Reiki. There's a transmission. You come into contact with a practitioner who then transmits it to an interested student. So there is a parallel.
Right. And you could
But what I hear you saying, Eric, is that there could be possibly distinct frequencies that somehow or another, through your experience in, was it Venice Beach, that the transmission that you initially received somehow metabolized through your system in such a way.
Good word.
You like that?
Yeah.
You can borrow it. That it came somehow through your system, so that it has, if you will, a certain kind of resonance that is having a different kind of effect. And this happening to you, 3 or 4 years ago, and Reiki happening whenever it happened to that teacher some centuries ago. Well, yes, you said it before. There are new energies that people know about that are coming to the planet. All old in the universe, but new to Earth. And it could be that your antennae have been set to receive those. And therefore you're passing them on, in kind.
I'm just resetting my antenna. Very cool. All right. Yeah.
Anyway, it's just another way of interpreting it.
Right. It was about 10 years ago. It started in 1993. And yes, I can see where the attunements to Reiki are sort of transmitted, but I guess the difference is then the size, the volume, the intensity, and
as you said, bandwidth could be. Yeah, it's certainly interesting. I mean, it could be that a Reiki practitioner who's gotten the transmission, blah, 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 is just not tuned to what's actually happening now, but they were tuned to when Reiki first began being transmitted, whenever that was. Right. Do you know what I mean? It's just a different, opening.
There's another way that I've heard it described that seems to make a lot of sense, that the healing techniques that we've had up until now are possibly subsets of what this is. So think, for example, of...
I got it.
Right.
Yeah.
But just for the people listening,
absolutely.
Think, for example, of Reiki as being a letter R, Qigong as being a Q, Jinshin as being a J, and there are only so many things we can spell with an R and a Q and a J, depending on how we want to mix it up and maybe make a license plate or two.
Right.
But all of a sudden, now we're gifted with the alphabet, which gives us the ability to function with an entire language.
Right. That's beautiful. It's a beautiful, beautiful idea.
Thank you. I just metabolized it.
Clearly. And assimilated it. What I'm gathering is that people who experience it are, one, tuning themselves, so they get that benefit. And the other, of course, desired outcome is the results that accrue to the various people who are receiving the work, who it's being done to, so to speak. Could you talk about what you have seen in the several years you've been traveling among your practitioners? People are suffering these days from, God knows, more different kinds of disorders and stress patterns than ever before.
We were.
What do you see it working as best?
I'll tell you. Well, maybe about 2 months ago. I don't know whether I don't see this show often, but it's called Extra. You get Extra TV out. Extra. Extra is like Entertainment Tonight. It's another one of that style of show. And they did a special segment on the healings because they brought me on and interviewed people who had had healings, and one child I can think of right offhand that I'd love to bring up in this case was a little boy named Brian. He was 5 years old. Brian's parents brought him to me in Austin. He had the classic cerebral palsy movements. He could only walk on the toes of his feet, and the balls of his feet. He couldn't get his heels down. His arms were in the air, forearms parallel to the ground, wrist hanging in that classic palsy fashion. To get up from a seated or lying position, he'd have to pull onto furniture, and to walk, he would have to hold on the walls and tabletops to do it. And then one hand, if it were free, were like this. They went both free for a couple of steps. He would fall. And another thing that's very classic about cerebral palsy is that Brian could only form a few single-syllable words, not multi-syllable, and not stringing them together into a sentence.
In sequence, yeah.
So it was very interesting because his parents brought Brian in. My assistant took care of them, got Brian all set up lying down on a table. Then I was brought into the room and I worked with him. And with this work, it's really a hands-off work. It's basically I just allow my hands to fall in, find something, feel for something, find it, play with it. Whatever it is, it's not what is there. It's simply that something is there, and work with that. And so I think his mother or father sat on the table and, did some nursery rhymes with him, things to keep his mind occupied, while he moved around like a little 5-year-old would kind of roll. And worked for about half an hour, which is generally about the length of a session. And then afterwards, we had finished, and Brian's parents said, Brian, why don't you get up, his mother said, and walk for Dr. Pearl. He didn't see you walk yet. So walk and show him how you walk, because they wanted me to see this. So Brian got up and he he walked to the door and came back again, and the mother said, "No, Brian, walk normally for Dr. Pearl." And then they looked at each other, and they realized that his arms were down to his sides, his feet were flat on the ground, and they wanted me to see how he was walking before, because I hadn't seen it.
Of course, because he was on the table when you walked in.
And he wasn't any longer. So we brought him out in the hallway, because we were in a large hotel, and not only was he able to walk, he was able to run the length of the hallway.
Oh.
Did a second session with him, and after the session we walked outside where there was a large pool area and like a 2-story set of steps. He used to have to take steps on all fours. He walked both planes of steps up and down. His speech had improved so dramatically, so instantly, that his parents, his speech therapist, and his physical therapist signed up and took the seminars. It turned out, I didn't realize until I got a letter being thankful for the session, that his father's a very prominent medical doctor in Austin. His mother's a nurse. And as I said, we have a lot of nurses and doctors doing this work. So the cerebral palsy story, since you asked for one, is one of my most recent that I can think of off the top of my head.
That is wonderful.
But the point is not about who had a healing when I've worked with them, because that's what I thought this was about in the beginning.
Right.
And
me.
Well, I thought that this was, and it is, a gift from God, love, universe, choose the word you like, they're all the same to me.
Sure.
And I thought it was a gift for me, just me, to be working with. But more and more after I worked with people who would come in for private sessions, I got phone calls saying that when they got home, their lamp, their computer, their television started turning themselves off and on and off and on. They felt things coming through their hands. They'd hold their hands by someone in their family.
Thanks, Eric.
They'd hold their hands by a
Here's
friend,
the bill.
a friend or a family member who had long-term health problems, and they were having healings. So we realized that it was being instantly transmitted, that ability to others. But what we had to do was learn how to find it and recognize it. Coming back to your original question and our discussion at the time, people had to learn to recognize it because they weren't exposed to it previously. We don't recognize things we haven't been taught exist. I mean, this has been substantiated. Probably the most famous classic study is the one with the tiger cubs. Do you know that one where they took 2 groups of tiger cubs, separated them at birth, raised one in a room with only horizontal planes?
Jerome Bruno's work. Yeah, I know. It's. I heard that it was cats, but exactly.
All right. Well,
no matter.
Cats.
It's the same idea.
Cubs are cats.
Excuse me.
Maybe it's different. Right. I thought it was tiger cubs. One raised with only
vertical stripes and one
planes.
Horizontal.
Not just stripes, but like tabletops. You know, and
all surfaces,
legs, all surfaces. And when they were released out into the real world, those raised with horizontal bumped into vertical and vice versa because they didn't know it existed, even though they could see it.
Well, it actually changes the physiology of the eye, of the retina.
When you recognize something.
Well, just in the formation of the perception of all vertical or all horizontal actually creates the way the eye functions. So it goes more than... It's not just a so-called psychological phenomenon or perceptual phenomenon. It becomes actually realized in the material plane.
Well, it is a perceptual phenomenon.
Indeed.
And what we perceive is also regulated by who we are.
It's getting
structure and function hand
true.
in hand. So, of course, our perceptions alter our physical and vice versa.
Exactly.
And I had something really important to say about that, too, and I just lost it. Oh, yes. So, what we've discovered is that people need to be exposed to this, and most people will feel it right away. Some people need to go through a learning process to recognize it because it wasn't here on the earth before, so they haven't felt it. The study we did on that just tightly was at University of Arizona. One of the studies we did, we worked with either I would sit opposite one of the students or one of the volunteers or someone that I had taught to do this work would sit opposite them. So if you were the volunteer, you would be blindfolded, and you would be told in random fashion that you can hold your hands either down or up passively or up actively to sort of search for a sensation. I was shown a card that you couldn't see that said right or left. So we had more distance than this, probably about 4 or 5 feet. And it would be the intention of the person sending to go towards your right or left hand, and you would have 60 seconds in which to say right or left. So if this were something that, people say, well, I don't have to learn how to feel this table. Why should I have to learn how to feel something else if I have to learn it? I'm probably learning to fool myself. So for people following that thought process, you should have about a 50-50 accuracy rate. Well, on day 1 of this 5-day study, there was a 65% accuracy rate, which did not seem to excite me, but the statisticians thought it was very important. What became more fascinating was that over the 5 days, by day 5, they moved up to between 89 to 100% accuracy level. So if day 1 they're at 65, day 5 they're at 100, what's formed here? It's called a learning curve.
Exactly.
You can only learn to find something if it exists.
Right.
Level number 1 of that. Level number 2 of that study is that some of the people were master healers in Reiki and some of the other healing techniques. When they started the study, they said, well, as soon as I hold my hands there, I feel my Reiki or my this or my that. They were in the group also from 65 to 100%. They had to learn to feel this instead of the Reiki. In other words, the study demonstrated a clear ability once you come into contact with this, because it isn't Reiki or the other techniques, to then distinguish it. So that showed its separation.
Yes, indeed.
And the third level is...
That's the answer to one of my first questions.
I know. I'm trying to tie this in. I'm really trying. Level 3 is the people blindfolded had EEG, brain leads on. So their brain waves were being... Although they went on day 1, from day 1 to day 5, from 65% to near 100% of being able to determine this. And 100% means you have 108 answered correctly, in a setting. Their brain picked it up 100% of the time, all 5 days. In other words, what you talked about is changing in the eyes or physiology or in the brain.
Yeah.
Well, what happened was the brain registered it. But our consciousness, not having experienced this on the earth ever before because it was not here, had to learn how to find it. Let's give you one fourth one, too. Here's the last one. Material. The last one is, and we had their brainwaves, and the person who was the facilitator, the one directing it towards the other one, if it were me or someone else, my heart wave showed up in their brainwave. This floored them because they were willing to accept that maybe brain
the shape
waves
of the EKG
showed up
matched
in
the EEG.
Showed up in the EEG. In other words, they were willing to accept the fact that 2 brain waves or 2 heart waves might have been trained. But they had never seen the phenomenon of a heart wave showing up in a brain wave.
Yes, indeed.
That's pretty cool.
That's really cool.
It's the ITC technique.
Is that research still being conducted? What is it, University of Arizona?
That was University of Arizona.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was saying it was beautiful. The ITC technique. Isn't that cool?
Oh, yeah. Exactly.
But that's what this is all about, isn't that
That's
cool?
right. Being cool.
That is. So I'm glad that
That's great.
Here in New York. I don't know that the show will air in time for people because I'm teaching tonight.
Yeah.
So it won't air here.
But
I'll be
we'll
teaching.
Put your contact information on for future.
Right. But I will be back in New York in August at Omega.
Oh, fabulous.
So I'll be speaking at Omega.
Fabulous.
And we'll also be next week. I can't tell you because I don't know what week we're on right now. Right now we're like March 7th or 8th.
Yeah. Wow.
Okay, so the following weekend after this, we're going to be in Philadelphia. Following that, Cleveland. And following that, for a couple of weekends, we'll be teaching in Toronto. So people can get to the website. It's the same title.
Sure.
The book is TheRe Connection.
Exactly.
Heal Others, Heal Yourself. And the website is TheReconnection.com.
Okay, very good. We will put that on as well.
Great.
So I hope this works for jet lag.
I hope so too. I never have jet lag, so it might.
To it.
Yeah.
But you are getting results with chronic diseases as well as
acute.
with
Chronic and acute. Absolutely.
Is there anything that you find in our last minute here that it does not respond to, or people that do not, certain kinds of conditions that it doesn't respond to?
No, because it's not faith healing. And I don't know that I can do this in a minute, but I'm going to help.
But if you can
there are a lot of things on the website. Let me give them an 800 number in case they need to find information.
Well,
is that all right?
We're going to...
You'll have that at the end.
Exactly, we'll have that.
This is not faith healing, so it does not matter whether you believe in it or not. As a matter of fact, you're almost better off not trying to believe in it, because trying to believe in it really hard, coming with that I believe,
but that's not
what
I was asking.
Attitude.
That's not what I was asking at all.
I was just asking. That doesn't respond?
Yeah, is there anything in the panoply of different kinds of conditions and stress patterns and issues people bring?
And that's what I'm saying. No, there's nothing that doesn't respond. It is only the person. Once in a while, it's not the disease that has the healing, it's the person. If it is appropriate for you at that point in time in your life, then that's the healing you'll receive.
Right.
But 3 people can come in with the same diagnosis, same set of symptoms, and because of that, receive 3 different sets of results. I cannot make any promises or guarantees.
Definitely. Certainly not. No one can, except for,
except for God, love, or universe.
God Almighty.
There
exactly.
You go.
So, well, that's beautiful. It's beautiful work you're doing, and I think you should keep going and teach the whole world. Maybe you can get to a rock. That's what I want to see happen, And to the White House. It's easier and closer.
Yes, it is.
Eric, thanks so much.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you again.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Great to see you. This is Mitchell J. Rabin for A Better World. I hope you enjoyed that like I did. And I hope to see you all next week.